Falconcast, the fastest growing podcast in the history of the known universe. And it is a Thursday. So without further ado, because nothing happened in the sports world over the last couple days. So
Nothing, right?
we really don't have anything to talk about. But I do want to, before we get started, I want to shout out to our old buddy Jerry Bow. I had a great conversation with him yesterday, and we're gonna do some things together again. It just there wasn't any like falling out or something. It was just that we had a business deal that it was my fault that I trusted somebody on, and we really weren't able to work together after that because we didn't have the money to do it, and that was my fault. But I just had such a great conversation with him yesterday, and I would, if I were a betting man, you might see him on this podcast like really, really soon. So anyway, love you, brother, and glad to talk to you yesterday. Let's get to it. AJ, where do we start with all this? Do we start with Belichick? Do we start with Saban? And let's not forget poor Pete Carroll out there.
I know, our boy Pete Carroll. Yeah, man, it's been, and Mike Vrabel. We haven't had a chance to hit on him either. It's been pretty wild, man. This is one of the weirdest coaching cycles that I can think of. Like the idea that Pete Carroll, Bill Belichick, and Mike Vrabel have been fired, or if you want to say parted ways, I don't know how. They word it, but they're fired. Like Pete Carroll said, he was like, I fought really hard to stay the head coach. That means if you're not the head coach anymore, you got fired from being the head coach.
Yeah.
But the idea that those guys are fired and Dennis Allen is still a head coach in the NFL is mind-blowing to me. I just don't. I have a hard time processing things like that. It's like, how can this be? How can this guy, like, is this real life? But they're like, some of the fire, Ron Rivera, totally expected. Like,
right.
It makes perfect sense. Like, there's a lot of these jobs that are supposed to have openings. But some of the ones that do are fascinating, and some of the ones that don't are still pretty fascinating. So Pete Carroll may have been the most surprising one to me. Like, I heard rumors about Mike Vrabel. I heard that there was a potential that I thought they were going to trade him. Like, firing him made no sense to me because he's an asset. He is a valuable asset. And I know that he and management aren't exactly on the same page. Like, Mike Vrabel is one of those coaches who doesn't like it when you trade away their best players, which I kind of,
yeah, I get that.
Some guys don't like that. But I had heard that there was probably it was probably coming to a head. They didn't like the way he handled his induction into the Patriots Hall of Fame, made it seem like he cared more about the Patriots than the Titans, which maybe he did. But either way, they're like, oh, it would have been too difficult to trade him. What? It's too difficult to get an extra first round pick? Is that too difficult? Maybe more. You might want to, tough it out, Amy Adams, and go the hard route sometimes. Because just letting him walk away for nothing and paying him to walk away is crazy to me, and not getting any asset for it. The Belichick thing, I think we all saw coming. But Pete Carroll, was this a disappointing season? Yeah. But what Pete Carroll's done with Geno Smith at quarterback. I know, like, the last couple years have been good for Geno Smith, but think about what Geno Smith's career looked like before he got to Seattle. I mean, he was basically regarded as a completely failed first-round pick. And, Seattle's been competitive. Have they been good? No, but they've been competitive. And I'll say this, the most alarming thing is that they fired Pete Carroll, and the name at the top of everyone's list is Dan Quinn. If you think Dan Quinn is a better head coach than Pete Carroll, I got news for you. He's not. And Dan Quinn went to a Super Bowl. Kyle Shanahan went to a Super Bowl with Dan Quinn as his boss. And I think if you go back in time and you look at why that Falcons team was in the Super Bowl, it had nothing to do with Dan Quinn. I think Dan Quinn is a failure as a head coach. I think Pete Carroll is a Hall of Famer. So the idea that you would fire a Hall of Famer who wanted to stay there, wanted to be there, who really seems to connect with all the players despite being the oldest head coach in the NFL, seems like he's got really great relationship with his players. The players love to play. Like, Geno Smith was in the front row of his presser crying when they announced this. Like, they want to play for Pete Carroll. The idea that you would move on from him and then retread Dan Quinn because he's had a couple good years as the Dallas defensive coordinator with, by the way, some really freaking good players on that defense.
Yeah.
It's mind blowing to me. So, like I said, there's some that I kind of saw come. Belichick, I think we all saw coming. He doesn't seem happy. I don't know if he's going to coach anymore. That's going to be interesting to see. Like, if he does decide to coach, where it's going to be, what it would look like to see him as a head coach again, in a different uniform. It's not like, I mean, I know he's coached for the Browns and the Jets, but it's like, that's been forever. Like, what's it look like starting over for him with a new team is interesting to me. What happens to Pete Carroll? Does Pete Carroll just say, okay, I'll take this front office job? Or does Pete Carroll say, you know what, I got one more run in me? I'm curious to see with all these things. But it has been a freaking wild week. I think we can almost say it's a lock that Mike Vrabel goes to New England. I said yesterday, when the Pete Carroll news had hit before the Belichick news hit, I said Seattle just needs to throw the moon at Mike Vrabel today.
Right.
Like, don't wait around on this New England shit. Just throw the moon at Mike Vrabel right now and bring him in. But obviously that ship has sailed. I'm a big believer in this, though, Fred. If you fire your head coach and you look at the list of available head coaches and the guy you just fired is at the top of the list, you probably fucked up.
Yeah.
And I think the Titans fucked up. I think more than likely the Seahawks fucked up. So this is it's one of the craziest coaching cycles I can remember in the NFL.
Yeah, and I want to ask you a question, but first I want to welcome in all our Twitchers, Flip and Chucky D and Bleed Blue. Congratulations on Monday night. We'll get to that. Crystal, Said Boss is here. Our buddy Raj, Clara's here. BC's in the house. Lonzetta's in the house. B. Hannon, Bear Brother. Man, all of our guys, man, I appreciate each and every one of you. I mean, I come down to a simple question, and you mentioned Dennis Allen. If Pete Carroll's coaching the Saints last year, they're in the playoffs.
Yeah.
It's not even, to me, it's not even a debate. And why they keep hanging on to this guy. Now, I think part of it is there are a lot of bad owners in the league. Some of them get it covered up because they make the right hires. Guess what? Cal McNair is a fucking idiot. But you got DeMeco Ryans, and suddenly we don't notice it, right? We never hear him.
I think one of the things you got to remember is the cheap ownership. Sometimes you don't want to fire a coach.
Yeah, I guess. But I mean, that team's close. And I think if Belichick does now the fun rumor I heard was if the Cowboys lose in the first round, Belichick replaces McCarthy. That'd be fucking cool, actually, for football.
It would be. I mean, it'd be crazy. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I'd love to see it. I mean, and if you said, look at the playoff teams, how many of these playoff teams could you see the coach being fired if they are any of these teams under that kind of pressure that they could get fired if they lose? I feel like the only one has to be Mike McCarthy, right?
Right.
Oh, you know what? No, it's not. You know who? Well, obviously Tampa. I mean, I think if Tampa loses, but I think Sirianni.
Especially with that collapse. If they go out in the first round, yeah, that's a good one.
Which is crazy to think they were in the freaking Super Bowl last year. But I agree with you. McCarthy's probably not super safe, but Sirianni and Bowles, like if they whoever loses that is questionable at best, I would say. And Bowles is not questionable for this year necessarily. Like he probably did okay this year, but just his overall job performance, they're probably this isn't what we're looking for. We're going to move on. But I said this on SOV. If Sirianni gets his ass kicked here in that town, Eagles fans will not. They're not patient for it. They're not. Yeah, there's no way.
Bad Hut says Bills losing the first round, and Sean McDermott may have a hot seat. I think he might going into next year, but I think he's safe.
I do too. I mean, but yes, if you lose as a 10-point home favorite to anybody in the playoffs, you should probably be on a hot seat. They won't fire him, but he would go into next season with hey, this is it. Fucking make something happen here.
And Flip asks, what are the odds Billy B or Jim H go to the Bears? I think the Bears is an interesting job, especially with that first pick. And I don't know what they're going to do with Justin Fields. If they're going to keep him, then they trade it and get a couple other really good players. I don't know that I trust Caleb Williams anymore because of some of the mental stuff. But and Fleece, didn't they already confirm him for some reason?
I think he
fired
back next year.
He fired all his staff, but
yeah, he bought himself some time.
But I could see the Bears saying, you know what, Bill Belichick's available. See you.
Yeah.
And Harbaugh, I think, is another snake in the grass here because I think he's still a very good football coach. Obviously, he can coach in the NFL, and I think the right fit. You know, you're looking at a team, and the teams that are getting rid of everybody. There was a couple that were close, and then there's a lot of just bad teams that are going to have to. And that's where if I'm Belichick, I'm being real careful. It's like I think the Chargers is probably one of the most underrated jobs out there from a talent perspective.
The Chargers is the best job that's open and available, and here's why. Look at the list of teams that have job openings, and look at the list of quarterbacks that those teams have. And only one of those teams, like, was Justin Herbert great this year? No, but I mean, this is just the gap between Justin Herbert and the next best guy is probably like Justin Herbert to Geno Smith. There's miles between those guys.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the Raiders have no quarterback. The Falcons have no quarterback. The Commanders have no quarterback. The Patriots have no quarterback. Like, it's barren out there. So and that's why I think if Harbaugh went to the NFL, it would only be the Chargers because Jim Harbaugh is not going to leave the job he's got now, which let's face it is a really good job. Like Lloyd Carr lost at Michigan forever and stayed. Like you're allowed to, and especially now he's won a national title. He'll have all the leash in the world, but Harbaugh's not going to leave that job to go coach Mac Jones.
Right.
Like he's not going to leave that job to go coach Desmond Ridder. Like he's going to leave that job because he thinks that there's a special quarterback there. And the problem with that is the Chargers are not an organization who is typically willing to spend a bunch of money. And
right.
Like the fact that Brandon Staley was a budget hire. But again, they paid Justin Herbert like he's the truth. And I mean, if you want to make sure that money's not all wasted, you need to put a good head coach in there with him. I think that'd be the best fit. I don't know if the Chargers are willing to pull the trigger, but the Chargers are the only coaching job that's open that has an above average quarterback situation. And like you can say what you want about, well, they've got these draft picks. Washington's got a draft pick. I mean, you just said, I don't trust Caleb Williams. I don't trust Drake May. I don't trust Jaden Daniels as an NFL quarterback. I don't know if any of those guys are going to be any good.
Yeah, well, that's we're guessing, right? I mean, we think they might be good, and after the combine, everybody will have a better idea of whether or not they're good. But everybody thought Bryce Young was the truth last year, and it turns out it was C.J. Stroud.
So if I said what odds would you have to take? What odds would I have to give you to say you take Caleb Williams' career? I'll take Justin Herbert's.
I'm gonna take Justin Herbert.
Like 2-1, 3-1.
It's probably I was about to say about 65-35.
Yeah, I mean, Justin Herbert again. It hasn't been great yet, but you see the talent. I mean, he was top 5 in QBR this year for a team that won 5 games. The guy can play. It's just you got to get the right coaching. You got to get the right situation there. But yeah, Caleb Williams could, like you said, he could be Bryce Young this time next year. I don't know. He could be Josh Rosen. I mean, he could be Peyton Manning. I don't know, but it's a guessing game. With Justin Herbert, like the floor of Justin Herbert was this season, and statistically, Justin Herbert was freaking awesome. So it's if that's the floor, if this season was the worst Justin Herbert's going to be, he's pretty damn good. I don't know about these other guys. Like the Chargers, they have to find a real coach, though. They keep bullshitting at coach, and it's hard to win when you don't take it seriously. Like like you have to. I mean, look at the Texans. The Texans bullshitted at coach for like 3 years and were a joke. They finally got serious, and instantly they're in the playoffs. I mean, it's a big deal. Having a good coach is a big deal.
Yeah, and I'm interested though with some of these openings because I think. Obviously Belichick is. I hope Pete Carroll gets another opportunity, and I would like to see both those guys employed next year because Pete's old, but Pete's in great shape and his mind is in great shape and he's still enjoying it.
Yeah.
And and obviously Saban, I think you could see this year wasn't enjoying it anymore, and he talked about it how it was a grind. But in Pete's case, if I'm a team and I'm not 100% sold on my coach, Saints, Bears, I'd kill for Pete Carroll and say, hey, come on, we'll fire this guy. The other thing that I would like to see is if Vrabel does go to New England, takes Arthur Smith back with him, because that's one thing about Vrabel's offense is after he left, that's when the team kind of struggled, and they were a good team together. And I think they would do a good job in there, although I don't think Mac Jones is anywhere close to the answer.
But you know what? I that's where I give some credit to Mike Vrabel, and that's why what the Tennessee fans that were like trying to justify, like, oh, he didn't get it done, blah blah blah. Like Ryan Tannehill, realistically, is like about as average of a quarterback as you can find. Like Ryan Tannehill is the last rung before you say we're fucked at quarterback.
Yeah.
Like if your guy is worse than Ryan Tannehill, you're bad. Like he had Ryan Tannehill and was the 1 seed in the AFC.
Right.
The idea that he's gotten as much out of that Titans team as he had, given their quarterback play, like what he got at quarterback the last 2 seasons is a joke. So it's like, oh, they had that big collapse last year and they stunk this year. Well, yeah, who's been playing quarterback for him? Like Will Levis, who wasn't even like he shouldn't have even been on the field this year. Like if you were going to draft him, it was like draft him, let him learn. You didn't have that option. Like you're just running guy. Like you're not going to have success like that.
Right.
So to act like Mike Vrabel's the reason why the Titans weren't good, like take a look at that offense. Take a look at what he had to work with there. You took away his best weapon. The best player on their offense was A.J. Brown. You traded him. You started trading away the best players on the defense this season. It's like, of course he didn't have the success you hoped he would have because he wasn't set up to have that success. Like to me, I'm with you. If Arthur Smith, I think he's going to be a fine coordinator. I think he's just a bad head coach. That's okay.
We see that all the time. Yeah.
But that's the good thing about guys like Vrabel. Like Vrabel is going to surround themselves with good coordinators, and if they say something that he thinks is wrong, he's going to tell them get out of the way. And I think that's how you've got to be. And because I trust Mike Vrabel, I'm okay with him having dopey Arthur Smith back on his staff because Arthur Smith's not making the final decisions. And I just think some guys, when they're the ones making the final decisions, it's just not for them.
Well, and those two work really well together because Arthur Smith is a good offensive coach, but he's not a head coach. We've seen this 1,000 times with good coordinators who just aren't head coaches, and that's why I always love to hire them. If I were a head coach, I'd go get me a head coach who just been fired who was a great coordinator. And, Dan Quinn is that example. And I think there's a lot of them. And in this case, I think it'd be pretty cool. But I think what the Titans do, I haven't really heard anything at all about what direction they're looking. And knowing that Amy Adams, dumbass, they're going to screw this up.
The guy who is available and the guy who I think should be at the top of everybody's coaching list, I mean, outside of Mike Vrabel at this point, is Brian Flores. I still think Brian Flores is one of the 10 or 15 best coaches in the NFL, period. Like head coach, coordinator, whatever. I think he got a bad deal as the head coach in Miami. Like, okay, so your owner tried to get him to tank and he said no, and now he's blackballed. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But I thought he was a good head coach then. I think he would still be a good head coach. I think a lot of teams don't like going defense now at head coach, but I think that's the way I would look. If I couldn't have Mike Vrabel, which I assume he's gone, if I'm any of these other teams, the call I'm making is to Brian Flores.
I like that call a lot. That's a good one. And he's been really, really good as a defensive coordinator again. Man can just flat out coach, and he can do both.
Minnesota went from being one of the worst defenses in the league last year to being like a top 10 defense this year. Their players didn't change. It's the same guys.
Nope.
It's their scheme changed. And I mean, to me, that tells you everything. I keep hearing Bobby Slowick's name for a lot of jobs. if I were him, I'd be very careful about what job I take,
Yeah.
because this is one of those situations where it would almost be like Brandon Staley. It would be jumping before you're ready. And uh, I will say, I mean, he's off that Shanahan tree, and that those guys tend to thrive. But I would be careful about where you land, because when you're young and your first job ends up being a failure, it's hard to recover from. So if he goes to Carolina,
Yeah,
and
that's the one that keeps jumping at me. Don't go to Carolina.
if
That would be a
Carolina's as
mistake.
hopeless as it looks right now, and their ownership is now this is a hot take. The richest owners aren't always the best owners. So just
Right.
having a bunch of money doesn't make you a great owner. I don't know that he's making the right. It's a guy who's everything he's touched in his life turns to gold, except for this football team. That concerns me. I
Yeah.
just don't. I think it's a long climb out of this pit that Carolina's in, because I mean, their defense did okay this year, to the point where their defensive coordinator is getting looked at for other jobs, so he might not even be around if he
Right.
leaves. Oh, they're in trouble, because they've got no way to rebuild it, and they're stuck with Bryce Young, and I just don't know if Bryce Young's worth a damn.
Yeah, and it may just be the situation. He may get better next year. I mean, I still think the skill's there, but I just don't know if it's the skill level we thought. The one thing about Slowick, I'll say, I hope he learned from D'Amico, who last year his name came up for a lot of jobs. And before, well, I guess 2 years ago, technically it would be. And he basically just said, I'm not ready. I need another year as a DB. And, he did that, and it worked out really well for him. And I think he and Slowick are pretty close. And I'm pretty sure he'd tell him the same thing. Because, another year here, and then you'll have your pick of jobs. If we do this again with your offense, you're going to do better than Carolina.
And part of it for me is selfish, because I don't want CJ Stroud to get into the spin cycle that Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert did, where they're changing coordinators every year. It's a hard way for a quarterback to really develop. And I really think it stunted Trevor Lawrence. I think it stunted Justin Herbert. I do think it's hard to have a new scheme, have new verbiage every season. I don't think that's easy on quarterbacks.
No, it really isn't, and I think that it would benefit him. And as somebody who's happy to see the Texans succeed, I'd like him to stick around. But I think for him, another year would be really good. I mean, I've seen him develop over the course of the year, and get better and better as the year goes on. The only thing I still hate him for is using Tank Dell on that play that broke Tank. I won't forgive that. But otherwise, I mean, and seeing D'Amico learn on the fly too. And I talked about this a little bit on Monday, and the games they lost early on to Atlanta and Carolina, you look back on those, and wow, how did they lose those games? They were learning at the time, and they kind of needed those losses, because those losses led to a lot of good wins at the end of the season, because everybody, especially CJ, learned what to do in that situation, and the coaches learned what to do in those situations, and suddenly you've got a team that. I think they have a shot this week. I think the Browns are better, but they do have CJ back, and they do have Will Anderson back, who I don't want to dismiss how disruptive that guy is. And they didn't have those guys the first time, and I don't think Joe Flacco's going to go off quite the way he did in that first game. I mean, he was unbelievable. That was old school, vintage, win a Super Bowl Joe Flacco. But before we get to that, though, we'll just just to wrap up the colleges a little bit. Shout out to Bleed Blue. Shout out to my man Lawyer Dave, who I hope will be on later. Congratulations, you guys won it all. And kind of an interesting game. I think Penix did not play as well as he did in the semifinal, not even close. No. And I think Michigan just wore him down late is what happened. And I think Washington's a good team. I think they're better than the score, but clearly Michigan was better.
You know what I thought the big mistake, and this is something that you won't hear me say often. I think Kalen DeBoer had a bad game plan. And they played a little bit scared. Washington led the country in ADOT, and they were so afraid to go down the field against Michigan. And I guess they saw last week, the week before when Milroe took all those sacks, and they said, we don't want that to happen. But one of my biggest prop bet on this game was under 39.5 pass attempts for Michael Penix. And I figured he'd probably go under his attempts and over his yards. because Michigan was going to try to control the ball with their run game, which they did very effectively.
Yeah.
So when Washington was out there, they would want to score quickly. They wouldn't want to run more clock. They would want to shorten the game, extend the game, while Michigan was trying to shorten it. And you saw so many dink and dunk pass attempts, like it was crazy. It just wasn't Washington football. And the biggest shot they took all game got called back for holding.
Yeah.
It was just a weird game plan. And I mean, he threw so many freaking times. I think he was well over 40. So my bet lost. And I'm not just like bitter because my bet lost. I just think it was a bad game plan because I think you have to take shots, especially you're the underdog. Their whole plan is to keep Michael Penix on the sidelines because they don't want to give up those big plays. And you just played into it with some quick 3 and outs, and like you're punting on 3rd and 3 or 4th and 3. I mean, like it's not the way to beat Michigan. And this was a good Michigan team. I don't know they're great. I think the best team they played this season was Alabama. Alabama gave them hell. But it's 15-0 is 15-0, and there's no doubt who the champion should be. I will say, and like people were like, you were against Michigan all year. It's like that's just
I saw that tweet. Yeah,
Michigan was like number 2 in my power ratings at the beginning of the season, all the way to the end of the season, and I picked them to cover 22 points against Iowa in the Big Ten championship. Like I had futures on Michigan to win the Big Ten, Michigan to go over their win total, and they're like, you've been against Michigan all season long, because I was against them in the Alabama game, which probably should have won, and I was against them in the Washington game, which I was just wrong on. But I mean, to act like I was like some anti-Michigan guy was crazy. And then they were like, you still think Georgia's better than Michigan? And yes, I still think Georgia's better than Michigan. I understand why Georgia wasn't in the playoff. I'm not saying that Michigan doesn't deserve to be the champion, but I still think Georgia was the best team in the country. They just didn't make the playoff. And with 4 teams, it's going to be like that sometimes.
Yeah, well, we're not going to have to worry about 4 teams anymore.
Nope.
But the other thing I will say about that is I was impressed with Harbaugh's game plan. I think he did pick on some things in Washington. But the one thing that kind of drove me nuts is I'm watching all the, I watch all those stupid TV shows in the morning after big games, and it's like, is Michigan the best college football team ever? And I'm like, oh, just stop.
They're not even better than the last. They're the 2 Georgia teams from the last 2 seasons would smash this team.
2020 Alabama, 2019 LSU. That Miami team back in the day with Andre Johnson. Give me a break. And it's like
the Texas team they beat USC, the USC team the year before that. Like, there's this Michigan team's not one of the 10 best teams ever. But this is good. The game we play every year. A team, and especially if they go undefeated, we say, "Ooh, this is one of the best teams of all time." It's not. They're a good team. I mean, they played in a Big Ten that was maybe a little down, and
maybe a lot down.
They won, but remember, this is the same team. The last 2 seasons got absolutely waxed in the playoffs. Pretty much the same personnel. Like, this isn't the greatest team of all time. This isn't the greatest team of the last 2 seasons. Like, I assure you, they're good, but no. Again, I don't even think they're the best team this season, but that's just me.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just like you have to listen to the hot takes. The other one was, the Michigan, this is good that they won. The cheating thing is no big deal. And it's like these are the same assholes who were all over Belichick, all over the Astros.
Yeah.
This is no big deal. This doesn't taint anything. And yet you're tainting everything with the other ones. Fuck off already.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't care about this. I thought that I get they broke the rules. I don't think you should break the rules. But the idea that you went and watched another team play and like took notes, I feel like that's what you're supposed to do. The idea that that's even a rule is weird to me. So I don't have any problems with what Michigan did. I'm not calling. I mean, I get, they broke the rules, but I'm not calling this title tainted because I think
no.
I think they were fine without it.
Well, I've been consistent. I don't think the other ones were tainted either, but that's fine.
Now you
so
deflate a football. Ooh.
oh dear, oh dear. Yeah, that's like trying to have sex with a limp penis. Let's get to Nick Saban because this will cause some movement somewhere, right? Now I know Dan Lanning's already said no, and that was the name that came up first. I don't see any way Kirby Smart is leaving Georgia for there, and I think it's a hard job for somebody because that's a tough act to follow. And
It sure is.
Saban talked a lot about the grind and all of this, and it is amazing that we lose. I think the two greatest coaches in their sport are leaving the places where they've done the most in the same day. But I really believe that this job is great because Saban made it great. I don't think it's a cakewalk for just anybody.
I agree. This is a good job. It became a great job when Nick Saban took it, and like the greatest coach of all time took that job and turned it into a great job. I think it's much like New England. Is New England a great NFL job? I don't know.
No.
I don't think so. I think Bill Belichick and Tom Brady made it a great franchise for a long time. I don't have anything to indicate that now that those two guys are gone, they're suddenly going to be consistently good. I think that they're probably going to turn back into a pumpkin, and that happens. It's okay. Like you have a great run sometimes. Look at Nebraska.
Yeah.
I mean, how many different people has Nebraska tried to replace Osborne with, and you just can't. That said, I mean, Alabama has a lot of recruiting advantages that a place like Nebraska or Notre Dame or those places don't have. The problem is they've also got a lot of competition, and this is the best news ever for LSU fan. This is the best news ever for Texas fan, for Auburn fan, for Georgia fan, for Oklahoma fan.
Maybe even Aggie. Maybe.
Yeah, Aggie fan. I mean, the SEC's wide open again. Like it's. I mean, obviously, I still think Georgia's the king of the mountain there, but there's certainly a seat at the table available, and like you've already seen the recruiting fallout. A bunch of recruits have already said, "Oh, Nick's out, I'm out." I know, like the top one of the top receivers in the country has already said he's going to. He's always wanted to play at Texas. His receivers coach is at Texas A&M now, so he's looking at those two places. That's already other SEC schools benefiting from Nick Saban leaving, and I mean it's going to keep. And that's a kid who's from Alabama, like an Alabama high school player is going out of state to Texas now. That which wouldn't have. I mean, the best players in Alabama forever went to Alabama, and now I think it's kind of wide open.
Yeah, and I just don't know, like, the names that they keep throwing out there. And you're Alabama, you should be able to get some of these guys. But I don't see Sark leaving Texas for Alabama. I think he can turn Texas into Alabama, frankly. And Dabo, I don't know about. I'm not so sure that losing all his assistants the last few years that he's going to have any success there. And then Kalen DeBoer, you mentioned, and and Lane Kiffin. Those are the names they keep throwing out. I just don't really see a path for any of those guys, and I may be wrong about that.
Is it confirmed that Dan Lanning? Like I haven't seen that was confirmed that he said no. Is that a
well?
He
told his players that he wasn't leaving. He said we're looking at him, and he had a meeting with him, and he just basically said I'm staying. So I kind of got. I mean, I think he would be the best candidate. I really do.
I do too. And Scott and I, the guy I do the podcast with, straight out of Vegas, we had a debate about this, and I said I would want Dan Lanning. He wants Dabo Swinney, and I think hiring Dabo Swinney right now is akin to Texas A&M when they hired Jimbo Fisher. You're hiring a guy based on what he's done in the past with no indication that it's repeatable, and I think Dabo Swinney is a dinosaur. I think that he's not embracing the transfer portal. He's not embracing NIL. He's not relatable to players. I don't think Dabo's a good choice at all. If Dan Lanning's off the table, if that really is the truth, the next best option to me is Lane Kiffin. And you might laugh at that. And Lane Kiffin.
No, not me.
Lane Kiffin had a big job at USC, and I mean, depending on how you want to put it, maybe he blew it. I don't know. But to me, what that dude's done at Ole Miss warrants him getting an opportunity. It's pretty clear he understands the transfer portal. He understands NIL in a way, and he has a way of relating to young players that I think is ideal. And like if you hire him, I mean, he could be your coach for the next 30 years. Like he's that kind of guy, I think. Now that's changed. With Dan Lanning out of the conversation, I would say Lane Kiffin should be the next call. Although Kalen DeBoer is going to get some looks too. Kalen DeBoer worries me a little more than Lane Kiffin because Kalen DeBoer's only had a couple years at a football school. So,
Right.
No
Right.
offense to Indiana or any of this D3 stuff, but yeah, I think that it's Lane Kiffin for me, and maybe after that, maybe it's Mike Norvell with all the drama that they're going through there. Maybe you can snag him away, but to me, Dabo is not a good call.
And the one thing about Lane Kiffin, yeah, he had his issues at USC, and then he ran from Tennessee before he could truly fail. But he was a kid. He was way too young for those jobs. The Raiders job, too young for him. And he's developed into a terrific coach. And I think working for Saban really helped him. And I think that would be a guy who could keep them relevant. I mean, if you can do what you're doing at Ole Miss, you're going to have better players at Alabama.
Yep.
And he'll find a way to win there. So I think it's going to be really interesting over the next week or so to see how some of this plays out. And if there's other jobs that open after the first round of the playoffs, which we can move on to now, unless there's anything else in college football we need to hit.
Let's jump on it.
All right. So first round of the playoffs, and your home fields are the Ravens and the 49ers. I think most of us would say that's probably the best two teams in their respective conferences. I still think the Ravens are the best team. My only concern with them is that, boy, they do have some playoff hiccups and
long history of playoff failures for Lamar specifically.
And that's really the only thing I can look at and say, you know what, that worries me, because otherwise this team is the most complete in football, in my opinion. But we'll start with the FC. And in their usual Saturday spot, your beloved Houston Texans against the Browns. I think the Browns are the better team here, but I also think, what we saw a few weeks ago just wasn't fair because there wasn't a CJ, there wasn't a Will Anderson. And like I said, Flacco was out of his mind. I don't think Flacco's playing that kind of game again. He'll play well, but I think it really depends on how CJ lives up to the moment against a really great defense. And it's kind of unfortunate they really only have one receiver right now. But man, Nico Collins has turned into an absolute beast.
Yeah, I'm gonna. My favorite play in this game is the over 44.5. I mean, we saw what the Browns did to the Texans defense last time. The Texans played a pretty weak schedule of opposing quarterbacks, and when they saw good ones, those guys ate them up. They ended up winning that Bengals game, but Joe Burrow threw the ball around the yard on them. The only top 10 EPA offense they played all season was Baltimore, first week of the season. That's crazy to me that they were able to go that. So I think Houston's defense isn't as good as people think they are. And this Cleveland offense is, obviously with Joe Flacco, something's changed. Like they're just going for it. And I think, you mentioned Will Anderson. Do we know if he's playing? Because I know he didn't practice the last 2 days. And usually if you don't practice on Tuesday and Wednesday for a Saturday game, it's looking shaky. And Jonathan Grenard, Jerry Hughes, neither one of those guys, like none of their three pass rushers practiced on Tuesday or Wednesday, which is concerning. And then the Ravens are 8-0 to the over on the road. I don't know what it is, but their defense gives they give up about 11 more points per game on the road. I don't know why, but it's been consistent all season long. And they're going over by about 2 touchdowns per game. So the over feels like the way for me. I lean to the Browns in the game, and a lot of it is just an experienced quarterback versus an inexperienced quarterback. And Joe Flacco's got 15 starts in the postseason in his career.
Yeah.
CJ Stroud's playing in his first really big game, and it happens to be against the best defense in the league. No one in the league has their PFF grade drop more under pressure versus when they're kept clean than CJ Stroud. He is the sixth best quarterback when kept clean this season, 18th when he's under pressure, and that's out of the only 24 qualified, 50% of the snaps this season. So he drops from a 92 to a 48, and of course the Browns have the highest graded pass rush in the NFL. So I think that this game is the Browns to lose. It's a little wild that a team with Joe Flacco at quarterback is a 2.5-point road favorite. But I do think both teams have some success on offense. I mean, this game shot way over the first time, and Case Keenum started it was Case Keenum and Davis Mills. If that game went over, I expect this one does, especially like I said, I think the Texans may be a little banged up at pass rush. And if you don't get a rush on Joe Flacco, he's going to carve up this defense.
All right. Dolphins and Chiefs on a Saturday on Peacock, which everybody's bitching about. But if I'm Peacock, I want the Chiefs on there because, I paid a lot of money for this. So I want to get subscriptions.
You know what I think is true? I think you can, if you want to watch a bunch of different shows on Peacock, you need to have a subscription to it. But I think there's also free content on Peacock. I think you may just need to download the app and not pay a subscription. You should be able to watch this game. I know a lot of people are freaking out about it. I don't know if it's that big of a deal. You might just have to download an app. And if that's a problem for you in this day and age, then good luck watching Thursday Night Football or anything. But I don't think you have to pay Peacock. I might be wrong. I don't think you have to pay Peacock to watch this football game.
Okay. Well, I have it anyway for Law and Order reruns.
You're good.
Not a problem. Not a problem. But apparently the weather is so bad they're telling people not to go out. And it seems crazy that they're going to play this game in what is probably going to be horrible conditions.
Yeah, I mean, this looks like it's going to be wild, and it's not going to be a fun game to watch, I don't think. But it's playoff football, and this is what Miami was dreading. This is why Miami needed that game last week so badly. Tua away from home against good teams. So think about this: the Dolphins went 4-4 on the road this year. Their wins were the Patriots, the Jets, Commanders, and Chargers. Their 4 losses away from home: Bills, Chiefs, Eagles, Ravens. The average margin, 21.5 points per game they lost by those 4 games. This is Tua's first career playoff start. He's on the road, sub-zero temperatures with wind, playing against the best quarterback in the world. Meanwhile, Mahomes, this is his 15th playoff start. He's 11-3, 35-7 TD to interception ratio. So he's basically played a full MVP caliber season in the playoffs. And obviously this Chiefs team is struggling on offense. There's no denying it that it's a struggle for them, but I trust their defense more right now. The Chiefs were able to rest a bunch of guys last week, so they should all be ready to go. And the health situation for Miami is still rough. Right. I know Jalen Waddle is practicing. I know Tyreek Hill is practicing. Are these guys going to play? And how effective are they going to be in this kind of weather? Let me rant for a minute on Tyreek Hill.
Sure.
If you've got an ankle injury, and this happened last week against Buffalo, he was questionable all week with an ankle injury. He plays. He kept going in and out of the lineup. He was on the field for a couple plays, and he'd bang it up, and then he'd leave again. He finally catches a touchdown. What's he do? Like a springboard backflip.
Yeah, what the hell?
I mean, have some common sense there, dude. Either way, but they're still banged up on the offensive line. They're still banged up at receiver, and both their safeties, their starting safeties, haven't played yet. Haven't practiced yet this week. That's concerning. We already know they're without Xavier Howard, so you might be without 3 of your 4 starters in the secondary. And I know Miami's best path to success is running the ball. but they leaned on the run against the Ravens and got blown out. They ran.
Yep.
I mean, they ran for 6.2 yards per carry, got blown out. They ran for like 7.5 yards per carry early in the season against Buffalo, got blown out. This game had 35 points in the first matchup, and that was the game in Germany. It included a 59-yard fumble recovery touchdown, and it was still a 21-14 final. With this weather situation, like I played under 45. It's down to 43.5. I'd still play under 43.5. I think Miami has a really hard time moving the football here. I mean, we've seen them against good defenses really struggle. Baltimore, they struggled. I think that at Buffalo, they struggled. At Kansas City, they struggled. I think they struggle here. So I like the under in this game.
All right. I'm sure the weather's going to be just beautiful in Buffalo for the Steelers Bills. I think as long as we don't get evil Josh Allen, I just don't think the Steelers have enough for him, especially without T.J. Watt. But I mean, we've seen it. I mean, he damn near threw away the game to the Dolphins, and he's been evil Josh Allen a lot this year.
Yeah, I'm not going to touch the point spread here. If I did, it would be Pittsburgh plus 10.
Yeah.
I think this is just. I mean, the weather in this game is insane. They're talking about the temperature is only going to be 24. When I say only 24, like, oh, no big deal. But the wind chill is going to be below zero because there's gusts. They're saying up to 50 miles an hour.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, I think you're going to see two very conservative offenses. This is going to look a lot like when the Bills played the Patriots 2 years ago at the end of the season, and the Patriots ended up winning that game. The
10-7. Yeah,
and Mac Jones threw the ball 3 times. I would look at player props under on Josh Allen, Mason Rudolph. I played my favorite play on this game. I played the Chris Boswell under 5.5 kicking points. I don't think teams are going to even try to kick. I think you're going to see teams going for 2. I think the winds are going to be so crazy that they're not even going to try. So when otherwise on this game, like when they played this game last year, the Steelers weren't competitive. I mean, the Bills had 10.2 yards per play. Steelers had 5.1. I mean, no TJ Watt for the Steelers is brutal, but we talked about this a little bit last year when the Bengals played the Bills in the playoffs, and the big advantage it looked like the Bills were going to have was the Bengals offensive line was just dog shit. But the Bills couldn't generate a pass rush because the snow and the weather was so bad it was hard for them to get off, and it ended up not mattering. So maybe it doesn't matter as much that TJ Watt's out here. It's hard for me to trust Mason Rudolph on the road in a playoff game, but against a good defense. But I'm not going to play the side on this game. I'm looking at under on some props for the quarterbacks, for the kickers, for receivers. I think that this is going to be a Najee Harris game for Pittsburgh. I think they're going to work him to death, and I don't think there's much work for Jaylen Warren because. And this sounds really nice. Like it's like having a Humvee and a Maserati. They're like the broke dick versions of that. So it's like having like I don't know, like having a Jeep Cherokee and a IROC Z or something. But you don't take your Maserati out when it's snowing. And Jaylen Warren this type of game is not what he's built for. So I expect they use their snowplow here, and I think their snowplow back is Najee Harris.
Yeah, based on everything you've said about this, I almost have to take the Steelers plus 10. If it's going to be a low-scoring game, that's a huge margin for an NFL game where points are going to be at a premium. All right, let's move on to the NFC. Your beloved Green Bay Packers against the Dallas Cowboys. I think the Packers have been phony all year, but I'm still with the Cowboys, even more so than the Ravens. I'm not trust them in the playoffs, even though they've been so good at home this year.
Give me the over in this game. I mean, Dallas is great at home. They haven't played a ton of great offenses, and the Packers right now are a great offense. Jordan Love in the second half of this season. So the first 10 games of the year, Jordan Love, his average QBR was 50.9. The last 7 games, it was 76. First 10 games this season, 16-10 interception or touchdown interception ratio. Last 7 games, 16-1. So same amount of touchdowns, 1 pick versus 10, and that's in 3 less games. Since week 11, he is the highest rated or second highest rated passer in the league, behind only Brock Purdy in EPE plus CPOE, which is like completion percentage over expectation, a pretty deep analytic stat that has been a great way to project quarterbacks.
Right.
And this, I think Dallas is going to put up their numbers. The Packers defense is dreadful. But I think Green Bay can keep up. Green Bay's 3rd in the league in points per game on the road this season. Dallas is the highest scoring home team this season. I think that this is going to be a shootout. I kind of lean to Green Bay here. I feel like McCarthy makes some sort of bonehead decision late that lost a cover. I would probably have this game, like if I were lining this game, I'd probably make it on the other side of 7. I'd probably have Green Bay plus 6.5.
Yeah.
Their offense has played so well. So I think there is some value on the Packers, but I think both teams score a shit ton here.
All right, Rams at Lions, which I think I may be looking forward to this game as much as any of them because there won't be the weather issues there.
I think it's the most fun game of the week on paper anyway.
Yeah, it certainly is. And the Rams have played terrific over the second half of the season. And, the one thing they do so well is, everybody gave them grief for trading all their number 1 picks, and it got them a Super Bowl. But they draft so well in the middle of the draft. They get the Puka Nakuas, who are first-round picks.
Yep.
And they're still relevant. And I think you and I have kind of been on them all year.
And they have listen, whatever it's time to admit, Sean McVay is one of the best coaches in the NFL.
Oh yeah.
And listen, I think that both these teams are going to have some success on offense, but I think the Rams are on a different level right now from an offensive standpoint. Since the midway point of the season, the only offense better per DVOA than the Rams is the 49ers. And a lot of that is Kyren Williams. Before last week where everybody sat out, they were scoring 31 points per game since he came back from injury. The Lions defense is going to be in trouble here. They are 29th per PFF in pass coverage. The Rams have so many weapons. It's like an overflow. Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, Demarcus Robinson, Tutu Atwell's back, Tyler Higbee. They've just got, and that's not even counting Kyren Williams. McVay knows golf better than anybody. I expect the Rams to have a very good defensive game plan. They've been solid against the run over that stretch where they've won 7 out of 8. Their only loss was that overtime loss to the Ravens. They're 8th in EPA per play in that stretch against the run. I think the Lions' injuries are going to catch up with them too. I think losing Sam Laporta is a big deal.
I think that's a huge deal. That's a huge deal.
He's their red zone target. He's the guy who they throw. He's their touchdown maker. Khalif Raymond injured, and the Lions just aren't super deep at playmaker. They've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I mean Jameson Williams has been a roller coaster. I'm just going to back McVay here against a quarterback who he knows and that he knew wasn't good enough to get the Rams where he wanted them to go. So I think that this is one of those games where Jared Goff kind of melts in the spotlight and the pressure's on him. And I think the Rams get it done. I played the Rams at 3.5. I'd still play them at 3. I think playing the Rams on the money line is not a bad call either. I think the Rams can win this game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I actually have a Rams money line bet already. Okay, and then the final one, the Eagles, who have really just fallen apart here over the second half of the season.
Almost like I told everyone.
Yep. Against the Tampa team that they're average. They've gotten a good year out of Baker Mayfield, but to me, this one is interesting because I don't know which Eagles team is going to show up, and I don't know when they're going to just flip the switch and suddenly be Eagles again.
I mean,
I don't see
is it
that.
possible they're just not that good?
Oh, it's very possible. Yeah.
Listen, this team +5 on the season in scoring margin. They won 11 games and they were +5 points on the whole season. It just doesn't happen. My favorite play on this game is the under. We saw this game once already. The Eagles won that game 25-11. It was at Tampa, and that was when the Eagles' offense was good.
Right.
It was 25-3. The Bucs scored a late touchdown, got a 2-point conversion. It was a grind for these offenses. The Eagles' offense is currently not good and not healthy. I don't know if you saw Jalen Hurts' finger. It looked like he slammed it in a car door. Like that's his middle finger. And think about when you throw a football, what fingers matter? Like your pinky and your pointer finger matter probably the least, but your thumb and your middle and your ring fingers matter a lot. Like
Yeah.
your middle finger is your pressure finger on the top side of the football, and again, it looked like it was mangled. And he'd say, "Oh, I'm going to play anyway." Justin Herbert had he had that hard time playing with his finger on his non-throwing hand busted. AJ Brown had to leave the game with a bum wheel. There were some people saying, "Oh, he wasn't really hurt. He was embarrassed that he fumbled." Maybe, I don't know, but he looked pretty banged up to me. Devontae Smith was too hurt to even play last week. This offense sputtered into the playoffs, and Tampa can still stop the run. Like that's what they do. On the other side, Baker Mayfield was like limping to and from the huddle. Like,
Yeah.
he's a gutty dude. He's not going to quit. He's a legit tough guy. Shit to say about Baker that I don't think is great, but you can't question Baker's heart. Tough dude. And while I think the extra day of rest helps both teams a little, I don't think it matters that much. Tampa this season, 11-6 to the under. So they're an under team already. Philly was 9-8 on overs. So they had one more over than under, but on the road, 2-7 to the under. This is a primetime under, a Monday night under, which was, those were about as profitable as you could get this season.
Right.
So I like under 44 in Philly, Tampa. I lean to Tampa here. I don't like either one of these teams. I think these are, if you take Pittsburgh out of the mix, I think these are the two worst playoff teams. And I know it's crazy. Like people are like, "Oh, how can you say that about the Eagles?" I've been saying it. The Eagles are an average team on a good day. And if they didn't do what they did last year, we wouldn't think they were any good. Like we just you have to get rid of that prior at this point of the season in this year without those coaches that are gone from last year. They're just an average team. I think the Bucks are a below average team, but my rule of thumb all season long is if you've got an average to below average team and you're laying points on the road, I'm not interested in you. And I think the Eagles are average. I'm not interested in laying a full field goal on the road. I think it's crazy.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I think the thing about the Eagles, they started off 10-1, but you were saying it then. Statistically, they weren't a 10-1 team.
No.
And just like a couple of years ago with the Steelers when we were still on air, and you were telling me, "Oh, the Steelers are 11-0, but they're not."
Yeah, like stats matter. Like you listen, over the course of a year, you're going to win games you're not supposed to win and lose games you're not supposed to lose. Like we were talking about the Texans earlier and some of the losses that in hindsight it's like how'd they lose that game? Remember the game at Tennessee? They should have never won that game, but they
Right.
did. So that's going to happen. The point is like it should over the course of a season it should weigh out. And if you look at stats, like you should be close to what your stats say you are at the end of the year. Philly is nowhere close to what their stats say there. You know who was a lot like this last year? Minnesota.
Oh, yeah.
Minnesota they were 13-4, I think, at the end of the season.
Like 11-1 in one-score games or something like that.
Like their statistical profile was like the 16th best team in the league, and they lost to the Giants at home in the playoffs. They probably weren't that good. So this idea that all that matters is your record, well, they just find a way to win. That's old. It's old school thinking, and I don't think that's the way to handicap. And that's why I've been against Phil. Philly's been an ATM for me. Just keep betting against the Eagles because the lines keep coming like this. Like the lines show respect for the Eagles that I don't think is warranted. It was warranted last year. It's not this year.
All right, so that should get you guys ready. My one team that I think might be able to make a run in the NFC. I like the Rams and where they are. That's kind of my snake. I think you look at it and everybody's Dallas, San Francisco. I think the Rams could break up that party. In the AFC,
the problem is if the Rams win, they're likely to be the lowest. Unless Tampa wins. But
right.
Excuse me. No, even if Tampa
Tampa's a 4 because they won the division.
Yeah. So, if the Rams win, it would take Dallas losing. Otherwise, if Dallas, if the Packers win, then this doesn't matter. But if the Rams win, they're likely to have to go to San Francisco next. And I mean, Shanahan's just owned Sean McVay. That's my biggest concern. I'd love it. I like the Rams as a future if I knew that there was someone else who had a chance to knock off the 49ers before the Rams played them. But the way it's lining up, it's hard for me to pick the Rams over the Niners.
Yeah, I just if it's a team other than really what we've talked about with Dallas and San Francisco, I think it could be the Rams. The other one in the AFC, I think it's the Browns.
I think so too. I think if Joe Flacco, if he can get hot for a 3-game stretch, and we've seen it happen before, the rest of that team is built to win. Like they're an elite defense. Weather's not going to bother. Like, you think playing in Buffalo or Baltimore or Kansas City is going to bother the Browns? That's what they're built for. That's what Joe Flacco's done his whole career. So to me, that's the dark horse in the AFC. Dark horse in the NFC is the Rams. But at the end of the day, I'm still likely picking Baltimore and San Francisco to be in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, me too. But you just want to make something interesting come out of it. But
man, I'll tell you, Buffalo. I still think Buffalo's better than what people think they are, and
I do too.
Somebody's got to exercise their playoff demons in the AFC. Otherwise, I mean, it certainly could just be Patrick Mahomes wins the AFC again. That's entirely possible. Otherwise, somebody who hasn't done it before is going to do it in the AFC. Or Joe Flacco. I guess Joe Flacco has done it before, but it either Tua, Josh Allen, or Lamar kind of breaks what everybody's saying. These guys aren't ready yet. These guys haven't taken that step. So unless it's Mahomes, it's going to be one of those guys, and that's anybody's shot there. Like if Josh Allen has a shitty day against Lamar, it ain't happening. If Lamar has a shitty day against Josh Allen, it ain't happening.
Yeah.
So I do think that Buffalo is certainly live in the AFC.
All right, how's your college basketball been going so far?
Not too bad. Yesterday was a shit day. I had a couple that I thought were really short. Like Missouri State just didn't even show up for me yesterday. But man, it's been good with a lot of these upsets. Like all these top teams fall, and I called Iowa State playing tough with Houston. I think Houston is going to realize, and really we've seen all the Big 12, the new Big 12 teams kind of realize this, is the road trips in this conference are different than American Conference road trips. And like going to Iowa State, and doesn't matter if Iowa State's ranked or not. There's a thing called Hilton Magic, and Iowa State has it. Going to Allen Fieldhouse, going to Baylor, like we just saw BYU go to Baylor, and it's like, oof, it's just a little overwhelming for them.
Yeah.
And you know what? Credit to Central Florida for getting beating Kansas on their court, which is awesome. But remember, doing it on the road is way different. So if you're looking to kind of pick at these new Big 12 teams, to me, the time to do it is on the road, and particularly when the new Big 12 teams are favored on the road. So I think when you see Houston, is a big favorite against Kansas State, for instance, or Baylor or someone like that, remember that these road trips are tougher than you think they are. Like, don't just look at the team's record and say, oh, Kansas State's not that good. That's a tough road trip, man. It is a tough road trip, and it will never not be a tough road trip. Even when they're shitty, it will be a tough road trip.
Listen, TCU's a tough place to go play. I mean, it's going to be tough. And I was all over Iowa State the other night for those very reasons. And it's going to be an adjustment period. I think they're good enough but they could easily lose 5 or 6 games. I mean, even when you've got Kansas at home and things like that. I mean, it's still Kansas, so it is a big step up in class. And I think they're good enough, but it's not going to be like the American where, oh, you lost to Temple, that's horrible. I mean, that came out of nowhere.
Man, if some team gets through this conference with 1 or 2 losses in conference play, that team's probably going to win the national title. Like, because that's a miracle. I just think this conference is so deep, so loaded. Like the idea that Texas is like a bottom half of the Big 12 team right now.
Yeah.
Like Kansas State might be a bottom half of the Big 12 team. Those are good teams, man.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is But I don't think West Virginia is good. I don't think Cincinnati's very good. But for the most part, Oklahoma State's not very good. But for the most part, everybody's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
And like any given night, it's and again, even with those schools, I don't want to go play a road trip at West Virginia. I don't want to go to
No.
Iowa or to Oklahoma State. Those are still tough trips. But there's a lot of depth in this conference. And what's crazy is they're going to add the Arizona schools. Like this is a college basketball dream. The Big 12 is.
Oh yeah, it is. All right, AJ, man, appreciate the insight as always. Great stuff. Fun show. We'll do it again next week. And thanks again, man. Really appreciate you.
Anytime, brother.
All right. And I want to thank everybody who's been on today. Half Nielsen had a funny comment I wanted to share because he was talking about playing indoors and said, it's about Houston. We needed to provide a domed experience for overweight Texans fans to comfortably fist fight in the 600 level concourse. I think that sums up a lot of people in a very short way. All right, guys. Again, I appreciate you so much. It's funny how things work in life. I've mentioned on this before that 2023 was just awful, and 2024 was starting off great, and then I had a very unfortunate incident this week that has, it's a significant setback. But you know what, the business is going to be fine, and we're gonna keep building, and hope to add a third one hopefully next week. And I really hope that we're going to have Jerry Bow involved. But shit happens, and you just keep picking yourself up and fighting back, and that's all you can do. And that's what we're going to do, and keep putting on a good product for you. And hopefully, life will turn out just fine. And anyway, so I was hoping Lawyer Dave would pop on, talk a little bit about Michigan, but he has not made it. So I was stalling just a little bit there. And yeah, Jerry's going to be on Behan, and we're going to do some cool stuff together again. And I've missed him. And it was really, really good reconnecting with him this week, especially after what had happened earlier in the week. So anyway, that will wrap it up. I hope everybody has an awesome weekend. We'll be back to talk about the football on Monday, and I'm hoping Jerry can do it with me on Monday. We'll see. We'll see what his schedule's like. But otherwise, until then, stay sportsy, Gulf Coast Bad.